Greetings, and once again, welcome to Aspects of Aliyah, and may I take this opportunity, after a short break, to wish you and those that you love a blessed and prosperous 2026. It's been a time of great political stress internationally, not the least concerning Israel and the Jewish people. We're going to do a small aside broadcast about the situation of the Jewish people in Venezuela, but basically this is the first in a series on the major prophets. We spoke in the last broadcast about the whole range of prophecy. We spoke about the female prophets who were largely unsung, and we also spoke about the non-writing prophets, where we looked at Moses as an exceptional non-writing prophet. So we could look at the others, and we may do, but for the purposes of the times and the seasons that we live in, we're going to look for the next few broadcasts on the major prophets. So, the major prophets, according to the Hebrew Bible and generally accepted in Christian Bibles, the major prophets are Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah. But for the purposes of these broadcasts and the purposes of my forthcoming work towards a theology of Israel, some 2,000 pages odd, we're going to include Daniel in this as well, not particularly because the Jewish Bible scriptures rabbis consider Daniel to be a major prophet, although some do. We're going to include him in this set of broadcasts because it's very important if we look at eschatology. And eschatologically, Daniel is part of that progression, and his book deserves more attention, if that's the correct thing to say, than the minor prophets. The minor prophets also deserve attention, but we'll speak about those later, and each one of those will not take up too much time. Whereas with Isaiah, in particular, this will be at least 2 sessions and may even go into 3. So, please bear with me. Welcome once again. If you've seen any of the broadcasts, I hope you've enjoyed them. And as we move into these ones, I really want to encourage you to watch these and share them with your friends, because these are very important for the days and the times that we live in. So after that rather long-winded introduction from the UK, shall we proceed? So, obviously, we're going to start with our considerations of the works of Yeshayahu, Isaiah. So, of all the prophets in the Hebrew Bible, Isaiah is generally considered to have been of, I'm going to say, exceptional influence. Let me say that again, exceptional influence throughout the centuries, right from the 800s BCE, when these writings are considered to have originated. In brief, the corpus of the 66 books attributed to Isaiah is the longest prophetic book in the canon, and next to Tehillim or Psalms, probably the second biggest piece of texts that are attributed under a single name. The writings of Isaiah are cited more than any other Hebrew text in the New Testament and continue to be, in the Christian world, probably the most influential by Christians everywhere, actually, despite what strike the way, even in the modern day. I think it's very important to say that Isaiah is represented more numerously amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls than all of the other prophetic texts combined there. Quite something, isn't it? So, the Dead Sea Scrolls we've spoken about before, so we do not need to do another teaching or labour the point, but from when they were discovered, and even to this day, not all of them have been made available due to technical problems and other things. But at the time of this broadcast, we can simply say that Isaiah, repeatedly again, is represented more numerously amongst Dead Sea Scrolls than the other prophetic texts combined. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls at this moment, 230 scrolls, mainly fragments, admittedly, containing biblical passages. The book of Isaiah amongst these is it's probably the wrong term to use. Shall we say it's most popular or the most received? Maybe that's better. The most received. At the time of writing or recording, or I'm using both as we do both of them together, there is evidence, believe this or not, of 21 copies of the book in whole of fragmentary. If you think about it, it's just slightly short of 10%, isn't it? The most remarkable amongst the Dead Sea Scroll texts is what is generally known as the Great Isaiah Scroll. The Great Isaiah Scroll comprises the whole, let me say that again, the whole book of Isaiah, of its 66 chapters, and it is the only biblical text to have been discovered in its entirety at Qumran. That in itself is quite remarkable. So, let's have a little look after this introduction about Isaiah, the writings, and as we get into section 2, I have a nasty feeling, we might end up going into a section 3. Okay, so Isaiah, written in the beginning of the first temple period. The writings are set against the backdrop of a rising, violent, and dominating Assyrian Empire, and a time of Israel, divided kingdom of course, in decline. Isaiah rebukes Israel for abandoning God, pursuing corruption, and he calls for change and warns the nations, all of them, of their ultimate downfall. That is far too brief, but it's a good introduction. So, the writings of Yeshayahu are overarched by the themes of justice and righteousness, but also, and this is where it's so great, a profound hope for future redemption of Israel, a coming Messiah from David's line, and importantly, return of Israel from the scattering, and Israel's ultimate role in bringing God's blessings and redemptions to all nations. That is really something, isn't it? I never tire of reading Isaiah. I also never tire of reflecting how badly biblical exegesis and biblical teaching is on that wonderful, wonderful set of texts that we know as the book of Isaiah. Do you not find it slightly strange that there are a number of details that surround the lives of the non-writing prophets? We know quite a lot about Moshe. We know quite a lot about Elijah. We know a lot about Elisha, whereas there's hardly anything known about the major writing prophets, such as Isaiah. Now, we do know a little bit about Isaiah, Yeshayahu. We know a little bit about this. We know that Isaiah's father was Amos. It's generally considered by most scholars that he was also a member of the royal family. A number of reasons. Firstly, in some matter of Shaul, Paul in the New Testament, easy access into royal circles. He spoke very directly to the kings. Isaiah 7, 3 and 4, 38, 122. At other times he directly quotes the words of kings. There would appear to be dialogue, such as 2 Kings 19, 1 through 7, and so on. But importantly, Jewish tradition indicates that Amos was a brother of the king Amaziah, the 9th king of Israel. The father of Uzziah, making Isaiah the first cousins of Uzziah, and therefore part of the royal family. Sorry if that's a little bit wordy, just simply to say it was associated by marriage. It's very interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. If we look at this family, I think it's always good to look at the Jewish records of these kind of things. So let me just read this to you. This matter is a matter of tradition that we received from our ancestors. Amos, the father of Isaiah, and Amaziah, king of Judea, were brothers. That's in Megillah 10b, 13. This matter is a tradition that we received from our ancestors. Amos, father of Isaiah, and Amaziah, king of Judah, were brothers. This indicates that Isaiah was also, and this is a big one, from the house of David, and therefore a descendant of Tamar. So we're going to take a break now, but now we're going to look at the massive amount of years and influence that Isaiah had.
What would you do if you knew that your family and loved ones were hopelessly stranded? Imagine if that were you, and all you wanted more than anything was to go home. Jewish people all over the world are experiencing this pain right now. They dream of the land their father promised them, and without a miracle, all hope is lost. For many of us, we don't think twice about buying new clothes or something that catches our eye. There is nothing wrong with this. However, I am reminded of the words of Yeshua in Luke 47, "To whom much is given, much is required." Out of our blessings, it is our duty to care for those in need. Since 1995, people just like you have supported Ezra International and helped thousands make their way back home. But there are still tens of thousands waiting to be rescued. You can turn hopelessness into tears of joy. Give your best gift today.
So, welcome back to Aspects of Aliyah, session 1 of the prophets, starting with Isaiah. The initial evidence appears in the opening verse of the first chapter. And it tells us that Isaiah prophesied to Uzziah, sometime known as Azariah, for quite a long time, because Uzziah ruled between 781 and 740, 39 years. 2 Kings 15 through 7, 2 Chronicles chapter 26. He also prophesied during the reign of Hotam, or Jotham in English, between 740 and 735, 5 years only. 2 Kings 15, 32 to 38, and 2 Chronicles chapters 27. He also prophesied for the reign of Ahaz, 735, 715. That's quite a long reign, that one. 2 Kings 16, 120 and 2 Chronicles 28. And the more important one, I think, for others, was the reign of the godly king Hezekiah, between 715 and 687. That is a long reign. 2 Kings 18 to 20, 2 Chronicles 29 through 32. So, it's quite amazing when we look at these things. So, Uzziah reigned for 52 years in the middle of the 8th century. So, therefore, it's reasonable to assume that Isaiah must have begun his ministry sometime before Uzziah's death. An educated guess would probably be in the 740s. I think it's one of the most magnificent scriptures. I'm never tired of reading this. I'm never tired of teaching on it. I think it's one of the most magnificent scriptures in Tanakh. And it relates to the calling of Isaiah. This in chapter 6. Oh my word. In the day King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. Wow. I'm sure you all know it, but I shall leave you to read that yourself. The notice is of great significance and is highly dramatic, particularly as it's narrated in the first person. Oh my, how fantastic. So, anyway, at these sort of times, it may well have been a contemporary with Manasseh for some time in the later years. The last historical event in the book of Yeshayahu is the murder of Sennacherib in 681. Yeah, 681. Before the Common Era. And that illustrates greatly, doesn't it, the amount of time he was prophesying. I mean, really quite extraordinary. So, I think we can take it that this great prophet of ours, the Jewish people first and ours, yeah, he must have lived until his 80s. And that is quite remarkable because, you know, it tells us, or it's implied over the years, that prophets were without honour generally. They're very challenging. And it was a precarious life. It was a very precarious ministry to be in, being that as a prophet. And I think it's just interesting to just recapitulate here. Yeah, the prophets were messengers of God, and they were generally messengers to people who did not want to hear what they had to say. Anyway, so at a recent conference I attended, it was considered that Isaiah prophesied for maybe as long as 64 years. Quite spectacular, isn't it? So, who was Isaiah? What do we know about him? We said that we know very little, don't we? So, we know, or we can assume, that he was married, and his wife is referred to as the prophetess, which is a feminine version of the Hebrew word for prophet. Now, that could be either because she was recognised as such in a similar manner to Devorah or Huldah, as a recognised prophet with an office who spoke in public arenas or to leaders, shall we say, and was received and accepted, or received and rejected as such. However, in the absence of any biblical record or Jewish record, it's probably reasonable to say this was a term simply meaning that she was the wife of the prophet. She remains unnamed. However, we know they had either 2 sons or 3 sons who we should regard as being living prophecy, employed in the themes of judgment and the hope for Israel. So the 2 sons were prophetically named Shear Yashub. A remnant shall return. This is very interesting, isn't it? A remnant shall return. Bear that in the back of your mind as we go on. The younger son, Mahel Shalal Hashbaz, is best translated as quickly to spoils, or to the spoils, and the plunder will arrive speedily. So, in one sense, we've almost got 2 prophecies sitting upside down. We have a prophecy of destruction, but we also have a prophecy of return. Interestingly enough, in a lot of Jewish writings, they do appear slightly upside down. So, there we are. Isaiah, his family, and so on. So, we probably need to look at what happened to him later throughout his life. However, even though Isaiah is probably the most read, most written about book in the canonical Bible, it is also beset by some problems, and some scholars see them as almost insurmountable. And these studies are generally referred to as the Isaiah problem. So, although highly contested, the majority of biblical scholars consider the book of Isaiah to be the result of multiple authorship, hence the so-called Isaiah problem. It's not a new debate, as many people seem to think. When I've searched the internet and Christian websites, most people seem to think that it's a 19th century problem and result of critical scholarship. I choose to differ for the following reason. In the year 1100, the Common Era, a very esteemed Jewish commentator, Moshe ben Shmuel ibn Gekatila, he lived between 1248 to 1325, but he was working on earlier things, made the shocking contention that Isaiah was only the author of certain chapters of the book of Isaiah because it seemed untenable. That sort of hung about for a little bit, but then in 1167, the great Jewish scholar Ibn Ezra also questioned the authorship of certain sections of the book. And that remained in abeyance because the church fathers said it was never even thought about it, basically, considered just a single book and so on. But by this time, of course, the whole prophecy of Isaiah had been recast in a completely different way to the writing's reception or its destination of its audience, which we'll speak about in the next session. So, after a period of about 400 to 500 years, the Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza, he lived between 1632 to 1677, he inferred in his writings that chapters 44 forward derived from a 6th century background or exilic to post-exilic period. About 100 years later, the Lutheran theologian Johannes Doidelin, the Wellhausen School, published, and is very well received in Europe, the theory of multiple authorship. Sometime as two authors, towards the end of the last century into the first part of the 20th century, the German Lutheran theologian Bernhard Dom decided it was probably in 3 parts in his massively influential commentary on Isaiah, where he separated chapters 56 to 66 from 44 to 55 as later composition. The theory grew until the modern reading generally considered 3 things. So, very briefly, first Isaiah, written by Isaiah, chapters 1 to 39, second Isaiah, chapters 40 to 55, third Isaiah, chapters 56 to 66. And this is very interesting, and we're going to regard these things. But I do want to say, no matter how we analyse these things, God's word is always eternal, and many things that are considered prophetic are really foreshadowing, but they do have more than a single application. So, 3 authors of Isaiah, or just 1? We're going to look at this as we go on, but I think the thing we're going to find really exciting for us is, although these things are extremely contested, when we look at the structure of Isaiah and its whole message, it was certainly for the time, but it certainly was in 2 parts. There's a part for the time, there's a part for the future, but that future wasn't as probably been thought of, because the central theme in Isaiah, in the second part, is of a new Exodus. Firstly, the Exodus from Babylon, and those scriptures are quite clear, but also an Exodus from the 4 corners of the world. And for us, we should be very excited about this, as we get a newer and clearer and more exciting vision of the prophecies of Isaiah. So as ever, dear friends, God be with you until we meet again. Shalom Aleichem.